Welcome to a new tutorial. In this one we will create a fading panel for the main menu. So clicking on the main button will make the main menu appear or disappear. We will use a fading state as it's visually more appealing than just clicking it on or off. We will use the Canvasgroup and specifically the alpha value for this. Since the menu also holds the buttons that control the functions of the different scripts, we need to deactivate this, and we will use a Graphics Raycaster to deactivate it. The last thing that we need to do is create a script to control all of this. We will use, as in the pre-tutorials, ChatGPT, but rather than just copy and pasting it, we will raise several questions to see what ChatGPT provides us, as the questions are really important to get the right information. We will just copy it and go over it step by step to see what we can generate. But that's enough said, let's go. What we want to do is fade the menu to an invisible state, and we can do so by controlling the alpha value. It's not there right now, but if I add a component which is called the Canvasgroup, and if I type in Canvas, I have access to the Canvasgroup, you can see that the alpha is present here. It's a 1, so it's not visible right now, but if I move it to a lower value like this, everything becomes invisible. All the components which are a child of the panel also become invisible, which is exactly what we want. We can head it back to 1, so we got 1. What we want to do is click this button and control this value from 1 to 0, and we need a little script for this. In ChatGPT we can generate really good code that we can use for Unity. The key aspect here is to state the question correctly, otherwise you will get information that you cannot use. A basic understanding of coding will really help to see if the code that's provided by ChatGPT will work or not. In this case I just put in some phrases to generate some code. Let's look at the results and see if we can use it. Let's start with a basic question to generate a fading panel based on a mouse click. It does exactly that. The code will make the panel fade in, but it will fade back out immediately after a certain amount of time. It doesn't allow us to control the fading state with a mouse click. When we raise the second question, let's use the alpha value, as this is the value we want to control. It takes us a bit closer to the solution, but now we use the image color component, and we cannot use it as we have used an image as a background. With the last question, we have code that we can use. It uses the alpha value of the Canvasgroup, exactly what we need. Let's take this code, head back to Unity and go over it step by step. I'm in the scripts folder. I'm gonna press the right hand mouse button, create, and we're gonna create a C# script. Let's call this panel fade. And we are gonna open this up. And we are presented with the basic script. We are going to insert the script that we generated in ChatGPT, and let's go through it step by step. First thing we want to do is we want to eliminate the start and the update functions as we don't need it. The next thing we want to do is get access to the Canvasgroup. If we head back into Unity, we can see we got the panel and we want to get access to the Canvasgroup. So this is the one we want. Let's head back to the script. And we can do it by making it a public variable. So public, then Canvasgroup. And we want this to be Canvasgroup. That's the first one. Then we want to control the alpha value. And if we head back to Unity, we can see that the alpha value is the one we want to control. This one from 1 to 0. So let's head back. We want access to the alpha values in the script. So I'm going to call these public and floats. Then the first one is going to be the alpha value A. And I'm going to set this to 0, which is completely invisible. And I want obviously the opposite, which is going to be a float as well. And that's going to be the alpha value B. And then I'm going to set to 1. So I got both of the values for the alpha. Completely invisible and completely visible. Then I want a transition, and this I can use in a public. I can use a float, and let's call this transition duration. And let's set this 1F. And I can change this in the hierarchy later on, so I can make it as long and short as I like. Then we got almost all the variables. What I then need is a float value to keep track of the state of the alpha value. It's either 1 or 0. This I can make private, and that's going to be a current alpha value. So I'm going to keep track of the alpha value state. And I need a trigger, which is a boolean. So in this case, I got a private as well. Let's call this bool because it's a boolean. And we're going to call this is toggled. And we're going to start with a false state. So I got my variable that keeps track of the alpha value state, and I got a trigger. We can set the start parameters in a start function. So let's call this a private, a void, and start. And let's make this to a function. What we want is the current alpha value, which we got up here. And let's just copy and paste it. We want to set that to the start value, which is completely invisible. What we want to do now is get access to the alpha value of the canvas group. So taking a look in Unity, we see that the canvas group is right here. And we want to get access to this particular value being 1 at this point. Let's head back to the script. We can get access to the canvas group, which is right here. We can get access to the alpha value using a period, and we can choose alpha. And we're going to make this equal to the current alpha value. And in this case, we have set the current alpha value. So in this case, we've set the alpha values at the startup, and we can move on to the next script. Getting to our next script, which is a public. We want a void. And we can toggle the alpha state. So clicking on the button will change the value. Let's call this toggle alpha value. And therefore you can make a function. And let's just put the brackets here. First thing we want to check if the button has been pressed. So we can use the is toggled. And if it has been toggled, we can reverse the state. So we can say if toggled, please reverse the state. And then we want to check what the value is. And we can keep track of this in a float. So let's call this the target alpha value. So we're going to keep track if the state has been toggled and what the alpha value is. And we can check it to see if it's toggled. We can set it to, and you use a question mark for this, to the alpha value B, and otherwise we're going to set it to the alpha value A. So we are going to store in the target alpha value the value of the alpha. It's either B or A, and we can check it by using a question mark. So we got the toggle state and we got the alpha value state. And then we want to use a coroutine as we want the fading of the panel to be performed over various frames and not to be done instantly. So taking a look at coroutines. Then we can write this as start coroutine. Then we need to give in a function that's going to be executed. In this case, let's call this transition alpha. And we need to pass in a parameter, and we can use the target alpha value, and we can just copy this in here. And we can close it. So now we got the coroutine in place. And now we need to set up the coroutine through an IE numerator, which we can call a private, then IE numerator, which we need because we're using a coroutine. And this is obviously the name, the transition alpha, which we can just copy after name. And we need to pass in a float. And let's call this the target alpha. And then we got the two brackets. And the transition alpha is underlined as we don't have return type yet, but we'll get to that in a second. First thing we want to put in is a float and our start alpha value. So what we have is a float. We have the start alpha, and that's going to be the same as our Canvasgroup, which we got down here, .alpha. So this is our start parameter. And then we need to set the time. So what we want to do is we want to float. We want a start time. And that is time.time. And we need time.time as this returns the time that has passed in seconds since the game has been started. Then we need an end time. And that's going to be a float as well. And the end time is the start time. And let me just copy it from here. Start time plus the transition duration, which we can grab here from the top. So the end time is the start time plus the transition duration. Then we got that set up. Now let's write the code that's going to take care of the transition. So we're going to include a while statement. And we want this to be performed while time.time is smaller than the end time. And then we want the code to be executed. So as long as time.time is smaller than end time, please perform this time. We are gonna start with a float. And we're gonna call this normalized time. And that's gonna be equal to time.time minus the start time. And I can copy this from here. And this I'm going to divide by the transition duration. So what it says here, I'm going to create a normalized time which starts at the same because time.time will be equal to start time. As the frame changes, time.time changes. This is going to give me the gradual time over the transition. The time.time will start to vary once the button is pressed. Each frame it gets incremented. Start time remains the same, so I get a gradual change over time divided by the transition duration. Then I want the interpolation to be performed precisely, and I can use this in a float. I can call this current alpha, and then I can use an interpolation method, which is the mathf operation .lerp in Unity. And I can start, and I need three values. I need a start value, I need an end value, and the interpolation method. I can start with the start alpha. Then I can change the target alpha. And let me just write alpha. And I need an interpolation method, which is normalized time. And I can copy this from here, which makes it a little bit easier. And this is the interpolation method for the change in alpha over time. Now I need to set the value. So I can go to the Canvasgroup .alpha. And let me just write alpha. And I'm going to set this to the current alpha value, the one I just calculated in the previous line of code. And I need to get out of this function, which is done through a yield statement. So let me just write yield, then return, then null. So I'm breaking out of the function right here. And this is the code. Let's save it and head back to Unity. In Unity, I can go to the panel, which is here on the right hand side, and I can drop the script on here. Alpha value is 0. Let me drop the panel in here. So I got the canvas group. Now I want to head over to the button where I want the on-click event to happen. So I got the main button, which is the one on top right here. Going down to button, clicking on the plus button. I'm just going to drag the panel in, which holds the script that we just created. So the panel is inserted. Let's find the script, which is panel fade. And then we got the toggle alpha value, which is the script that we just created. Now we can start up the game. And it should start up and everything is gone. And that works perfectly. Clicking on the button will make it appear. Clicking on it again will make it disappear. So that seems to work perfectly. The only problem is that it is invisible, but it's still there. So if I click on the button, you will see that I can still activate the whole script. When we go to the panel, we want to add a component that allows us to block any input. And we can do this by adding a component. And this is a Graphics Raycaster. And you can see it's added here. We can deselect it. Now when we push the game view, we can make it appear. But since the Raycaster is deactivated, it doesn't accept any inputs anymore. So I can click wherever I like. And this we want to control as once we turn this on, we can activate it again and we can change everything that we like. We just want to control this toggle view. So let's write a little script to control this. And this is a very basic script for which we don't need ChatGPT. Just right hand mouse button, create and C# script. Let's call this Raycaster. Let's open this up in Visual Studio. The first thing we want to do is we want to get to the component Raycaster and we're going to make this public so we can access this in the hierarchy. So we can call this Graphic Raycaster and we can call this Raycaster and we can close this. The Graphics Raycaster is still underlined and that's because this is part of the Unity interface or the graphical interface. So we need to access the namespace for the UI. So we need to add Unity engine.ui. And once we added this and we gotta close it, then it becomes available. So the Graphics Raycaster is part of the Unity engine UI. So we have defined this one. Then we are gonna set it in the start function and we wanna set it to false in the beginning. So what we can do is we can take our name, which is the Raycaster, and we can say enabled, and we can set this to false. And we can delete the update function as we don't need it, but we want a function to deactivate it or toggle the state. So in this case, it's void, and let's call this deactivate Raycaster. And this is a function, and let's just make this with the two brackets. And what we can do is Raycaster enabled, which we set to false at the start function. And we can toggle the state. So from enabled to disabled. And this is the entire function that we need. Now let's jump back to Unity and insert the script. In Unity, head over to the panel and we are gonna drop the script that we just created on the right hand side. So the Raycaster is enabled. Now I'm gonna drop the panel in there. So I'm gonna grab hold of the Raycaster on this panel. Now I'm heading over to the main button and I'm gonna add the on-click event. So next one is gonna be the panel, which I'm just gonna drop in here. Now I'm gonna select the script that we just wrote, which is the Raycaster script. And we wanna select the deactivate Raycaster. So it's deactivated upon startup. And let's test this out. We can click on the screen. Nothing happens. We make it active. Everything works. Let's hide the main menu. There we go. Everything is gone. I'm clicking on the screen and the panel does not accept any inputs anymore. So everything seems to be working here.